Welcome to Same Surgeon, Different Light. I am Dr. Sara Pereira, and I'm thrilled to kick off our 6th season of this STS Surgical Hot Topics podcast with all of you. Joining me today is our guest co-host, Dr. Fatima Wilder. We are recording live from New Orleans at the STS 2026 annual meeting. Today we're excited to be talking with Dr. Doug Wood.
Same Surgeon, Different Light is brought to you by the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Career Center, where you'll find free access to cardiothoracic surgery jobs, career development tools, and professional guidance. Visit the STS Career Center at careercenter.sts.org.
On today's podcast, Dr. Wood shares his unorthodox career journey. From growing up on a farm in rural Michigan in a family that valued education, to attending the National Science Foundation Summer Science Program at Purdue University, to becoming a national champion rower at Harvard, and ultimately serving as division chief, department chair, and international leader in lung cancer surgery and advocacy. It's a fascinating conversation as Dr. Wood reflects on his career with humility and his self-deprecating humor. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Same Surgeon, Different Light. We're excited to be kicking off Season 6 here at STS 2026 Live. Welcome. So I am Dr. Sara Pereira. I'm a cardiac surgeon at Indiana University. And it's really a great pleasure today to be co-hosting this episode with Dr. Fatima Wilder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
So for those of you who don't know, the Same Surgeon, Different Light podcast series was started about 5 years ago with the initial co-hosts of Dr. David Wood and Tom Varghese. And our purpose in these podcasts is to feature surgeons with unique backgrounds, different skills, and different walks of life for our listeners. We have a very large international audience that we're proud of, and it is a great honor to have Dr. Doug Wood from University of Washington here with us today.
Welcome, Dr. Wood. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to give you a little background on Dr. Wood. Our special guest today, he's the chair of surgery at the University of Washington, a past STS president. So many successes and achievements and accomplishments and acknowledgments that we unfortunately don't have time to cover all of them, but he's someone that we've admired.
Are you sure we can't list it?
I mean, we can. I'm happy to sit here and do so, but Dr. Pereira has some personal memories in terms of her time applying for residency and being interviewed with Dr. Wood that I'm sure she'd be happy to share. But I just want to personally say thank you for being here, and we'll get started.
So I first met Dr. Wood that he would never remember when I was a mere tiny general surgery resident trying to apply to thoracic surgery. You've been in Seattle since 1992, Dr. Wood, and I won't add up all those years, but you've been a huge influence in my career. And recently, maybe about 5 years ago, Dr. Wood and I had the pleasure of working on the STS workforce on inclusion and belonging together. So it is a true privilege to have him here, and we're interested to hear all of your wisdom.
Well, that won't take very long, and I think that if you're going to get all my wisdom, it's going to be a very brief podcast, so I hope we can have more subjects than that.
So for those of you that don't know this, I found this on the internet. So Dr. Wood grew up in rural Michigan in a town of 4,000 people. And he was the first physician in his family and ended up going to college and applying to a summer internship program, perhaps, for rising people interested in the math and sciences. So he went to Purdue University, which I thought was fascinating because I now live right by Purdue University and stare at it every day. So what was it about this program in your early life
that made you think, I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to become a really prominent lung surgeon, chair of surgery, do so many things in advocacy? I mean, what was it about this one opportunity that led you into this career that you have?
Well, Sarah, you've done your research well, and I would say that I'm going to go backwards a step even before Purdue. And my experience at Purdue certainly did not launch all of that you talked about, although I guess ultimately it did because it opened doors for me. But yes, I grew up about 3 miles outside of that town of 4,000 on a farm, and my sister and I are both first generation higher education. Turns out my sister is the smarter of the two of us. She has a PhD in early childhood education. And my parents didn't have opportunity. They grew up in the Depression on a farm. World War II happened. And they had very little opportunity, but my sister and my parents had a couple of things. They highly valued hard work, and they valued education, even though they did not have much education opportunity themselves. And when I look backwards and think about how little they had, and yet how much they supported my sister and I to achieve a whole layer of accomplishment that they didn't have an opportunity for, it's quite amazing. And one of those things was my high school biology teacher thought that I had promise and sent me to this National Science Foundation summer science program at Purdue. And I spent a summer at West Lafayette. And the key thing there was it gave me this opportunity to see other students that were there they were mostly from prep schools on the East Coast, and they had a whole different life experience than I had, and they were talking about SAT scores, and I didn't know what the SATs were. And they were talking about applying to Ivy League schools. And so a lot of that experience of going to Purdue ended up being influenced by the peer group that I was then mixed with that otherwise never would have occurred, and kind of opened up doors that I wouldn't have considered. And it still goes back to my parents allowing me to have that type of opportunity that was really way outside of their norm of what they had as an experience for themselves.
So it's interesting you mentioned Ivy League schools, because we also found out that when you were applying for college, you initially planned on just applying maybe just to Michigan State, but then you secretly applied to Harvard, even though your parents thought it might be a reach. I'm not sure how you feel about that. And then fast forward to them dropping you off in Boston, and I'm wondering what that experience was like. What did your parents think in light of what you're saying their background was?
Well, Dr. Wilder, yeah, so you've dug deep there. That's a very fine point. So you are right. I came back from Purdue, and I had this experience with peers that were applying to Princeton and Harvard and Yale, and I was thinking maybe going to Western Michigan University. And so I kind of went, well, I think I'm as smart as them, so I'm going to apply to Harvard. Just one, Harvard and Michigan State. So I told my parents I was going to apply to Harvard and Michigan State, and they said, Michigan State's fine, you cannot apply to Harvard. And they supported me in a lot of things, but there was something about that was just too far off. Financially, culturally, religiously. It was a non-starter. And so I applied to Harvard secretly, and they didn't know. but I got in. And so then they had to get up to speed. Yeah. And the biggest aspect, and you ask, how did they feel? I think I needed to be self-sufficient financially, and so I did cobble together scholarships and loans and work-study program that I was, to make it, to be able to put it together. So I think that was okay. I think they still worried culturally, and they still worried about my soul. Maybe rightfully, but they were also proud. Yeah. I think they were a little stunned and didn't know what to make of it, but also were proud.
Was there a moment where you were maybe not bold enough to say, "I told you so," but you just kind of gave them a nod or a wink?
I don't think I was brave enough to do that.
Okay.
No, that might have gotten me a whooping, even if I was old. Taller than my dad, I still might have gotten hit for that. Yeah.
Understood. Totally understood.
I know Dr. Wood well in many virtual meetings that we have, and he's often the most polished and well-spoken person on the virtual chat, which I really do admire. And how did you tell your parents when you got that note in the mail that you were going to Boston?
Yeah, Dr. Pereira, I don't remember. Unfortunately, that's a long time ago. And I think there was some point prior to getting the note that I had to let them know that this had happened. And so I think it crept up on them. I think they never thought I would get in, so it wasn't a worry until I got in. And then I think they were also just used to dealing with me, and I was going to do what I was going to do, and they didn't interfere.
So to separate yourself after you got to the big Ivy League university, you really became an accomplished athlete, which, many surgeons have athletics or music in their past. And you were a collegiate rower. You won multiple national championships, including a gold medal in rowing. And I rowed for a year in college, Dr. Wood, at a smaller Division I school, and I know how much hard work it is. And I actually had to stop rowing to do all of my science classes and labs because you can't work out 8 hours a day and then go to the, gym and row, and I can't even remember the language anymore. But how did you become this really successful rower and complete all your pre-medical coursework?
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about it. I'll go backwards a tiny step, and athletics has always been important for me in my childhood and young adulthood, and in some ways even now. I was a swimmer in high school, and I was moderately good. And when I went to Harvard, I went to the swim introduction program because I thought I'd go out for the swim team, and I was way out of my league. It was clear that I was not good enough to be a swimmer at the Division I collegiate level. And the crew coach had sent me a recruitment letter. I didn't even know what rowing was. My dad and I went rowing to go fishing in a lake near where we lived. It was a different kind of rowing that we were doing. I didn't even know, but I was kind of impressed that I was recruited by the coach. And then I realized, I think the coach recruited everyone that was 6 foot tall and said, come out for crew. And I did. And there are seminal moments in your life. Actually, going to Purdue was one. Going out for the crew team was another, because of what you said. My collegiate experience was predominantly sport. And I did pre-med also, but it was all seasons training for rowing, and with the fortunate aspect of having this success that you described, and a gold medal at Henley. With my friends from that are still my closest friends. And we are going back for our 50th reunion this year, because that was 1976. But like you said, sport or other accomplishments like music is a really good training ground for us as surgeons. There's this aspect of the discipline, of hard work, of teamwork, of patience, of how much time it takes to practice for those few moments of competition that is analogous to what we have to do as surgeons. And I think about rowing as an especially a team sport, where your team needs to trust you to give your all, and you need to trust every other person that's in that boat that they are also giving their all. And that's what it's like when we are in the operating room, or what it's like in the teams that we work with in our health systems. There's this aspect of learning discipline and hard work and confidence in the team around you that I think really comes from an experience in music or in sport. And for me, it was in athletics.
Yeah, I often think back to rowing in my own little way. I was in the second boat at Cal and short and not a champion. But it gave me the mastery of every second in the boat, which is often what I think of in coronary bypass surgery, right? And so I think the similarities of that teamwork are so great. But my point is that, Dr. Wood, you've mastered everything that you've really set out to do in your life and your career, and it's really cool when I learned that about you.
Yeah. So making the connection from rowing to medical school, residency, MGH, you spent a year in Australia as a registrar, and then you were lured to Seattle. One, I wonder, when did you decide that medicine was the path? You mentioned pre-med, but was there a defining moment where you said, I'm going to be a doctor? Did you know you were always going to be a surgeon? And then to Dr. Pereira's point on success, my second part of the question is, you started the lung transplant program, you did lung cancer screening work, you've been an educator, a master educator, and you seem to have success in each of these areas. How do you do it?
Well, you're kind, and I think that I should point out that it's not like that. There is the good and the bad. And so I was recruited to the University of Washington. This is my first job out of fellowship training. So I'm, just to let you know, I'm still in my first job.
Which is really rare.
Well,
Very
you
rare.
can figure out what that means. It could mean a good thing or a bad thing. No one else will have me. But I was really fortunate that Dr. Ed Verrier was building a program at the University of Washington and trusted me. He recruited me to start a new section of general thoracic surgery and to start a lung transplant program. And so that's a good, because he was an amazing role model and leader and friend that opened many doors for me, supported me, and I made a good choice. And the leader that I trusted to recruit me, that was good. And another good thing is it was successful. I think the community of Seattle and the Pacific Northwest was hungry for dedicated thoracic surgery in 1992. And the program grew. We grew from about 150 cases a year to about 1,500 cases a year. That's good. That's cool. And here's the bad part, because I think it's important that people hear our struggles. And I was operating at 3 hospitals. I was on call every day and every night, including a lung transplant program. That was hard. I was running around town with consults and operating sometimes at all 3 of those hospitals in a given day. I was working harder than I did as a resident, and I worked really hard as a resident.
Can you say that again? Because I don't think most trainees believe that's possible.
I worked harder than I did as a resident. And in a sense, I was good at it because I was well-trained as a resident. But then there's another thing. One of the senior faculty decided they didn't like me and started undermining me in the institution. And I had a couple of years that were very dark, where I was strapped in terms of time and felt that I was failing because I thought, I'm going to be out of a job. You know, this person is trying to take me down. And this is maybe where sport helps, because maybe the grit and tenacity, I just said, I put my head down and I said, I'm going to do the work. I'm just going to do my work. And that's all I can do. And I had support ultimately from my chief, Dr. Verrier, from my chair, Dr. Pellegrini, from my mentors, like Dr. Mathieson. But the transition for me, the thing that I would say brought sunlight to the darkness was when I was able to recruit my partners. And the first partner that I recruited was Eric Valliere, who remains an incredibly close friend. Eric Valliere, Riyad Karmi Jones, Mike Mulligan, I recruited, and what I recognized, this was a great learning experience for me, is it was safe to recruit people that were better than me because they made me better and we were better together. And things were pretty good after that, because then I wasn't on call all the time, which I had been for 5 years. And I had great friends and partners to share this work with. And the person that didn't like me left. So I was able to stay, and I had the benefit of great people to work with then and through now.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
You know, it's great advice. I recently took on a new career challenge, as you know, and I think when we start in college and medical school, we often have so many friends and colleagues that support us so greatly. And as you climb the leadership ladder, it becomes more lonely. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear about not only recruiting people that were under you, but super supportive of you, but as you climb the leadership ladder and you become more distinguished or older, you know, who do you really lean on for support in those challenging times?
Yeah, you're right. So I'll say I really benefited in the early stage of my career from incredible mentors and supporters. I've mentioned Dr. Verrier, who was my division chief, was an inspiring, enthusiastic role model and somebody that I learned from by watching him. Carlos Pellegrini was my department chair. And I watched him evolve from not just a great department chair to an icon in surgery. And what I saw in him was a wisdom, a depth of emotional intelligence that was profound, and an integrity of purpose that I said, I want to be like that. And having people around you like that, it's hard to not be successful if you've got that support. And And so that's very important at an early stage of career and throughout your career, and it's something that I tell my residents and fellows that is more important than the amount of money that you're going to make or the title that they're going to give you or any of the other stuff, is if you have the people that are going to be around you care about you, will mentor you, support you, sponsor you, protect you. That's worth something that you can't buy with money. Mm-hmm. And you talk about progressing in leadership, and you are right. It can get extremely lonely. And it's one thing as division chief, which I experience and that you're experiencing. It's another order of magnitude as chair, and I feel that it's a pretty narrow group that I can call on to be a confidant about the loneliness of the things that are going on and the things that you're taking the blame for or taking accountability for. And for me, it's often been fellow chairs within my institution. I'm close friends with the chair of medicine, the chair of psychiatry. I guess that's a good one for me. And they are people that you can lean on because they are peers and they're dealing with some of the same issues. But also, I've leaned on chairs of surgery at other institutions. People like Dr. Sabik, our president, who's chair at Case Western. We became chairs close to the same time, and we call each other and help each other out sometimes with ideas or problems. So you have to find a different peer group of support. And then I guess I'd say executive coaching has supported me. It's helped me, and enough so that I trained as an executive coach myself. I spent a year training as an executive coach, not because I felt I was going to coach others, but because I recognized that the meetings I had in my office were more about coaching than about surgery, and that I could be better at my day job if I had that additional skill set.
So if the surgery thing doesn't work out, you have a backup plan, sounds like.
I think I still am dependent on surgery because, I've gotten reasonably good at that. I think I would probably stumble as a coach, but having the training, I think, does set me up to be a better listener and to approach how I'm working with faculty or residents or staff in a way that is more curious instead of my natural way, which is, I hear your problem, I have a solution, let me tell it to you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do that, but more often I can slow down better now and ask questions and often help them find the solution that they're looking for instead of me telling them what may actually not be the best solution for them.
Yeah. I'm an early career surgeon myself, thoracic surgery, and as we've been going through this, we've been told frequently that the culture of CT surgery has changed in the sense that it's more realistic now to have a balance in your life, family, a partner, children, and you've managed to do that. So I wonder, I'm curious, how have you balanced all of that without losing, or maybe you did at times, lose sight of one or the other? And what did you feel helped guide you back to that midline? And how would you encourage our younger audience that feels like maybe that's not possible?
Yeah, Dr. Wilder, thank you for asking that because that's really important to me. And I'm also going to point out success and failure. So you heard me talk earlier about the early stage of my career and how I was working and on call. We actually, my wife and I had our first daughter during that period. And I was dealing with it okay because we're just a couple, and she was independent, and she's a radiologist, and she didn't need me to be home, and it was working okay until we had our daughter, and then I was angry all the time because I'll use allegorically, I was puppy kicking angry. I was like,
he doesn't actually kick puppies. Please don't
quote
that
That's why I said
online.
allegorically. And it's because of what you're talking about, is this tension between work and our family, the people that we love. And I felt that it was off. I wanted to be there for my daughter, for my wife, and I wasn't. Recruiting partners and changing my life allowed me to evolve to, I think, what was still crazy. And my wife worked full-time, I worked full-time, and I think about, we reflect on what it was like when we had a 1-year-old and 3-year-old, or 3 and 5-year-old. It was crazy, but it was crazy good. And we could afford support, so we had somebody that was taking care of the kids during the day. And we worked together. We were real partners in the effort. And as they got older, the phone calls or texts back and forth of who's picking them up from soccer, and are you going to the parent-teacher conference, and all of that. And for me, I wanted to be there for everything. I booked OR schedules so that I could go to soccer games. And if the OR got delayed and I missed the soccer game, then I was angry again. But that happened less often because I got better at organizing it. And there's different phases. I think about when our kids were little, they had to eat before we got home. And so when my wife and I got home, the evening was dedicated to the kids. We didn't eat. We played with them, read with them, did whatever. And then when they went to bed, we cooked dinner. We ate dinner at 9 or 10 at night. And then when they got older and were in sports, and they could wait until 7 o'clock for dinner, I made sure I was home every night. And we had dinner together as a family every night, even if I needed to go back. And I was traveling for work, and we would go as a family. We went as a whole family to Taiwan, to Europe, to Mexico, because I was talking at a meeting and my wife could get off work and we'd take the kids out of school, and they went with us. And so they've been all over the world with us for meetings. And when my daughters are now 28 and 30, and we're very close, and when I look backwards, I still feel it's somewhat accidental, but I am so grateful for the way that my wife and I were able to be parents together, and that relationship that we had with our kids and we maintained with our kids. And it's going to be unique for everyone, but for us it was to let it be chaotic, let it be complicated, and just work it out every day the best we could.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's great advice. Thank you. Thank you.
We really appreciate you sharing about your family. I think as mentors, and for Dr. Wild and I as mothers in our specialty, I think the number one question we get asked by all of the students and residents at conferences is, can you have children? Can you be a surgeon? Can you be in academics versus community practice? And what you really outline is the struggle is real for everyone. It's not just women and mothers. I think it takes a lot of balance to be a successful physician in any specialty as a parent, and I haven't always modeled it really well, but I've always had a really supportive husband. And so what did your daughters think when they were 5 and 7 versus 16 and 18 about your career? And did you encourage them to go into medicine or surgery?
So my daughters have been making rounds with me since they were 2 months old. And so they saw my work. There's stories of, a very brief anecdote is, they were probably about 4 and 6, rounding on a Saturday, tracheal resection patient that's stridorous. And in respiratory distress. And so I'm saying we need to do a bedside bronchoscopy right now, get the bronchoscope, girls sit over there in the corner of the room. So they're in the corner of the room like wide eyes, and I'm doing a bronch in the room, and finally the nurses came and said, Dr. Wood, would you mind if we take your daughters to the nursing station?
Please.
So they had that experience when they were younger, and then they had experience going to conferences, and they were at dinners in Taiwan with all the Taiwanese surgeons. And so they had that experience, and I'd say that my wife and I, of course we talked about medicine. She's a thoracic radiologist, so we're talking about chest CT scans during dinner, and our daughters, we didn't push them towards medicine, nor discourage them, and neither one of them are in medicine. And I think the most important thing is I just wanted to be their dad. It wasn't about my job, I just wanted to be their dad, because that is the best role that I've had of all these roles that we have.
Your greatest accomplishment, being a father or a successful lung surgeon, if you had to pick one?
Oh, that's easy. Father.
So I wanted to pivot a little bit to talk about advocacy, because that's a big part of who you are, especially today, in terms of the work you've done with lung cancer screening and petitioning before, governmental structures and entities. And I actually heard another story that you were recently advocating somewhere, and someone, I'm not sure the exact context, said, I'm not going to give a dime to someone who's still smoking. But you somehow managed to convince them of the nuances of tobacco use and why it was still important to support lung cancer screening and get funding. So I'm curious, kind of, how did you harness that skill set, and what else do you think we could be doing to advocate for educating our patients on lung cancer screening and building that effort?
Well, this aspect about lung cancer early detection has been a major focus of kind of the last 15 years of my career. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's been a stumbling process, a learning process, because I thought when we had the National Lung Screening Trial that we could now start screening people. Then I thought when we wrote guidelines about screening that said we should screen people, that would mean we could screen people. And both were wrong, because if nobody's paying for it, it's not going to happen. And that is how I stumbled into needing to be an advocate and going to DC and testifying to a Senate briefing and trying to bring both education and pressure to bear on policymakers to move to the next step of us having evidence and guidelines, and now we also need a payment policy. Mm-hmm. And so that's been an education for me, an interesting and sometimes frustrating education, and it's one that's ongoing, because the first round of success was in the beginning of 2015, so 11 years ago. That's when we first got payment policy. But we've had to move the needle once in 2021 to change what that policy was. That was successful, and it needs to change again, and so I'm still working on that. You've probably seen there was a recent article in JAMA with a recent major coverage in the New York Times, and this was just a couple months ago. And so this is an ongoing effort to improve how we assure access, including equitable access to those that deserve to have early detection for lung cancer screening. So I'm having fun with that now because that's a skill set that is newly acquired, I'd say, of recognizing that we need more than science and guidelines. We also have to work with those that handle the pocketbook of medicine so that we can get access and coverage for the patients that we are advocating for.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm hopeful that mobile units will be a big part of the success and funding for that.
Dr. Wood, we could learn from you for hours and hours about all these topics. You've gone from this small town farm to really truly a giant that you're so well respected that you don't even know the impact and the influence that you've had on all of us. So my last question is, where is CT surgery going? What's the best advice you can give our medical students, college students, about how to navigate their careers? Where's the specialty going?
Well, that was a wide open question. So
it's a wide open question.
I think I'm going to give a brief answer because we had a presidential address yesterday from Dr. Sabik that I think was inspiring in telling us what we can do with this exciting specialty that we have. We are really fortunate to be cardiothoracic surgeons. It's amazing, and part of our strength is that we are adapters and adaptable. We are the people that drive innovation and also respond to innovation and change how we're doing operations or how we're treating things. And Dr. Sabik talked a lot about that yesterday, and we need to have that kind of creativity that melded with our work ethic and dedication keeps us leading in the specialty. And I think we have a very bright specialty. 15 years ago, people were saying cardiothoracic surgery is dead. Well, we have been resuscitated. We are alive and well, and I see an incredible future for the medical students, residents, early faculty in their career. I'll say that what we do is hard. What we do is also amazing. I think about this, about the privilege of having a job where we get to make people's lives better and help them live longer. And I pause and I think, what could be better than that? That's as good as it gets. And so I think we should reflect on that privilege to do what we get to do to help people. And a bit of advice is, if I think about, in this case, thoracic surgery, I'm going to be specific, and think about all the advances that we're having, I think is broadening the indications for surgery rather than narrowing the indications for surgery. But I also think that we're evolving where there is and going to be continued competition for other therapies for stage 1 cancer. And we need to be leading and controlling and doing that rather than watching someone else do that. I've always been an advocate for us continuing our skill as interventionalists, not just as surgeons. And so I'll use interventional bronchoscopy as an example, that this is a place where I think we should be careful not to give away things that we are good at and know how to do. So one of my pieces of advice for us as a specialty is don't give away the disease. Adapt our skill set to continue to respond to and treat that disease, even if it's not within an incision.
Dr. Wood, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question that they'd like to ask him. Otherwise, we'll say thank you for being with us and sharing wisdom with us, and just continuing to be a model, a role model, and an advocate and an ally for those of us that are coming up behind you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the privilege of talking with both of you. That's actually the best part for me, is to be up here with two amazing surgeons who are accomplished clinically, accomplished academically, and as leaders in your own right. So thank you for talking with me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you to STS for sponsoring Same Surgeon, Different Light series. You're going to be kicking it off this year, and so we should have that out in a few months. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
This has been Same Surgeon, Different Light, a podcast brought to you by the Society of Thoracic Surgeons. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please rate it 5 stars and let your friends, trainees, and colleagues know about it. On social media, you can use the hashtag #TheFaceOfCT Surgery. And for more information about the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, you can go online at sts.org.